Guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be going over Seneca's second letter to Lucilius and his moral letters to Lucilius. And this is number 2 on the discursiveness in reading. All right, so we're just going to start right here. And he says in verse 1, "Judging by what you write me and by what I hear, I am forming a good opinion regarding your future. You do not run hither and thither and distract yourself by changing your abode, for such restlessness is a sign of a disordered spirit. The primary indication, to my thinking, of a well-ordered mind is a man's ability to remain in one place and linger in his own company." So, okay, he opens this by, giving some praise to his student Lucilius, and he's saying basically this: that one good thing about a person is that they're not going around all over the place trying to distract themselves by changing where they're living, right? So he says that that's the sign of a disordered spirit. He says that a well-ordered mind is an ability to remain in one place and linger with your own company. And I think this is really important because this is really true. If you are constantly distracting yourself, if you constantly need stimulation, if you're constantly, it doesn't just mean traveling, but if you're constantly trying to distract yourself from life, some would call it escapism through video games, through YouTube videos, through recreational drugs, all kinds of things like that. It means that you don't have a well-ordered mind, right? You should be able to sit by yourself in your own company. In fact, a lot of the best work I have done in myself, philosophically, has been just sitting with myself and thinking about things, thinking things through. And if you can't do that, there's a problem. Okay, let's go on. And he says in verse 2, "Be careful, however, lest this reading of many authors and books of every sort may tend to make you discursive and unsteady. You must linger among a limited number of master thinkers and digest their works, if you would derive ideas which shall win firm hold on your mind. Everywhere means nowhere. When a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he ends up having many acquaintances but no friends. And the same thing must hold true of men who seek intimate acquaintance with no single author, but visit them all in a hasty and hurried manner." All right, so you can see why he started his letter like this, because he is doing the classic shit sandwich. All right, he started off by giving a compliment, but then he's saying, look, here's the thing though. You're doing good because you're not traveling all over the place and distracting yourself. But here's the thing that you're doing. You're reading a lot of authors and a lot of different books. And he's saying that in itself is not necessarily bad, but it might make you unsteady because you might be jumping from idea to idea, right? He's saying really that you must linger among a limited number of master thinkers and digest their works. He's saying that if you would derive ideas which shall win a firm hold in your mind. So basically what he's saying is that you can't just be going all over the place and reading all of these things. It might be good, but it's better if you go deep, right? Take what someone's saying and really think about it. Really, really study these master thinkers, right? I like where he says everywhere means nowhere. Right? Everywhere means nowhere. Such an important thing to think about. What does that mean in your life? Everywhere means nowhere. Are you going everywhere? Right? And, sometimes I find myself doing that, and I have to really focus back and realize that by trying to do all kinds of things, many things at once, I'm really doing nothing. When a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he ends up having many acquaintances but no friends. This is true, okay? But it's also true in the context that he's saying this. He's saying that the same thing holds true of men who seek intimate acquaintance with no single author, but visit them all hastily in a hurried manner. Right. So he's saying just like you'd rather have some true friends than a bunch of acquaintances, you should also have some authors, whatever you're reading, you should study that deeply so that you've got a deep hold on that. So you understand these concepts rather than bouncing around all over the place. And it's really tempting, right? I mean, I read a lot of books. I read perhaps 2 to 3 books a week on average. But lately I've been trying to focus on revisiting the same books. In fact, that's why I'm going through these letters again, because these letters that Seneca wrote are some of the best. All right, let's move on here. He says, number 3, food does no good and is not assimilated into the body if it leaves the stomach as soon as it's eaten. All right? Nothing hinders a cure so much as frequent change of medicine. No wound will heal when one salve is tried after another. A plant which is often moved can never grow strong. There is nothing so efficacious that it can be helpful while it is being shifted about. And in reading many books is a distraction. So he's given a lot of examples here, and these are very wise examples. This is why I like Seneca's writing so much, is because there's so many examples here, right? Food has to be assimilated into the body. If you throw it up as soon as it's eaten, it doesn't do anything for you, right? If you keep on changing medicine, you're not going to heal the wounds, right? A plant that's moved constantly is never going to grow strong. It has to have some time to grow some deep roots, and to, you might replant the plant, but you have to give it time to grow first, right? So he's saying that there's nothing, if you're shifting about all the time, never studying something deeply, you're not going to get any benefit from it, right? If you just read this book, read this thing here, and so many times this happens not just in reading, but just in life, especially in business, right? There are so many business strategies and techniques, and we can be all over the place, right? Have you really given the time that you need, right? Maybe you're starting a YouTube channel. Have you actually sat down and recorded a bunch of videos and podcasts, and have you given enough time? Have you given yourself a year of doing that on a daily basis or on a continual basis, right? Have you worked hard enough at one thing, or are you just switching around and switching from thing to thing, thinking that you're going to find the easy solution? Right, it's really easy to be tempted into that and to get distracted. Right, there's a squirrel over there. Right, shiny object syndrome. So he says here that accordingly, since you cannot read all the books which you may possess, it is enough to possess only as many books as you can read. Let me reread that. Since you cannot read all the books which you may possess, it is enough to possess only as many books as you can read. Okay. I've got a bookshelf that has a lot of books on it that I haven't read. Now, I've read most of the books that I own, but what he's saying here is that, look, you could just have the books that you can read. You don't need to. So many people collect books. All right. I know a lot of people are guilty of this. This was something that I had been guilty of in the past. I really don't do that as much anymore. Now I tend to read all the books that I collect, but you have to be careful about this, right? Do you have a library full of books and you're not actually reading those books? It'd be better to just have the books that you're going to read. Number 4, he says, but you reply, I wish to dip first into one book and then into another. I tell you, that is the sign of an over-nice appetite to toy with many dishes. For when they are manifold and varied, they cloy but do not nourish. So you should always read standard authors. And when you crave a change, fall back upon those whom you read before. Each day acquire something that will fortify you against poverty, against death, indeed against other misfortunes as well. And after you have run over many thoughts, select one to be thoroughly digested that day. Wow. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. So again, he's really saying the same thing here because it's so important. And this is a message that I need to hear myself because I can be distracted reading a lot of different books. I've got books on my desk right here, okay, that I'm reading, right? These I'm going through. But the point is what he's saying here is that you might be like, okay, well, I'd rather read this little bit of this book and read another of this book, right? I hear all the time that people are reading multiple books at the same time. You really shouldn't be doing this, right? Because you're not going to get as much value out of it. Yeah, you might get some value out of the books that you read, but he's saying you should read standard authors. And when you crave a change, guess what you do? You fall back on the ones you've read before. Again, this hits me hard because this is what I need to do, right? I know what books are really, really good. I've got 50 of the best books of all time back here on my bookshelf, and I need to pick up those books and just reread those books. In fact, that's why I bought all those books, because these are the books that I've read over time. But instead of getting a new book, which is tempting, it's sometimes better to just read the old book over again. You got some value out of it before, you're going to get even more value out of it if you keep on reading it. One of the books that I've read many, many times is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend that you read that book. So he's saying here, again, that select one to be thoroughly digested, right? And that's the thing is you really have to when you read a book, if you're going to get the value out of it, you have to really thoroughly digest that book. Let me pull up the thing here since my computer crashed here, but okay. And one thing, just real quick, what I have done in the past, which I found really valuable, is that if I listen to an audiobook or read a book and it's really good, I'll immediately reread it. Verse 5, he says, "This is my own custom. For the many things which I have read, I claim one part for myself." This is my own custom. For the many things which I have read, I claim one part for myself. Okay. The thought for today is one which I discovered in Epicurus. For I am wont to cross over even into an enemy's camp, not as a deserter, but as a scout. So Epicurus is a competing school of philosophy at the time, right? So Stoic philosophy, and then you have the Epicurean philosophy. And so he's saying, this is why Seneca's so smart. He's like, look, I can go over to the enemy's camp, not as a deserter. It doesn't mean just because I'm saying something that Epicurus said, or I'm studying him, that I'm a deserter. It means I'm a scout. This is such valuable advice in general in life, right? How many times are we like, oh no, I have to stick to my party lines? That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, right? You can learn something, right? Again, not to get too political here, but if you're Republican, you can learn from Democrat. If you're Democrat, you can learn from Republican. Both of you guys can learn from libertarians. But you know what I'm saying is that you can learn from someone without necessarily embracing everything that they say, because people that you disagree with also have wise things to say. So in verse 6, he says, contented poverty is an honorable estate. Indeed, if it be contented, it is not poverty at all. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. What does it matter how much a man has laid up in his safe or in his warehouse? How large are his flocks or how fat his dividends, if he covets his neighbor's property and reckons not his past gains, but his hopes for gains to come? Do you ask what is the proper limit to wealth? It is, first, to have what is necessary, and second, to have what is enough. Farewell. Wow. This is convicting. What is he saying here if we break this down? Well, he's quoting Epicurus, right? And the quote is, contented poverty is an honorable estate. So, he breaks this down for us. He says, if you're contented, it's not poverty at all. It's not the man who has too little that is poor. It's the man who craves more. That's the one who's poor, right? So it doesn't matter if you have all this money, if you have a warehouse, if you have a bunch of flocks, if you have, all of these things. If you are jealous of what your neighbor has, okay, and you're looking at the past, what you've done in the past, or not your past, or if you're looking at your past, but if you're not looking at your past, but you're looking at the future, and you're worrying about what gains you're going to have, then you're going to be uncontent.